Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
And there's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is
Work.
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest.
Welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the hottest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they'd transpired today? I hope you're all saying that with me at this point. I'm your co-host, Sadaf Hassan.
And I'm Sarah Sahagian, your other co-host. And this week, we are going to take a look at someone who is a perennial inspiration to us, the one, the only, Oprah Winfrey. If Sadaf and I were to make our own favorite things list, she'd be at the top all the time. In addition to her work hosting 25 hit seasons of The Oprah Winfrey Show, this mogul also created O Magazine, the publication that bears her first initial, and the OWN Network. And of course, she's interviewed every luminary of her time, from Michael Jackson to Tom Cruise and Meghan Markle. Today, Oprah's net worth is estimated at over $3 billion. She is also known as an important philanthropist and a thought leader who spoke at the 2024 Democratic National Convention. She is without peer. So, Sadaf, how were you introduced to the Queen of Talk? What are your earliest memories of this icon?
My earliest memories of Oprah are very fond. They are racing home after school to watch her at 4 p.m. on CTV after Passions. Sometimes she would overlap with Passions. And you know who I'd choose? I'd choose Oprah. And most of the time I'd watch with my mom. We had such a good time. She is a woman who I remember not only for her really great episodes of that particular show, but I was always very fascinated by her history, particularly as a journalist, because she was a key inspiration for me to the point where I still will look at O Magazine job openings because I'm like, you know what? If I could even get a whiff of her in that way, I would take it. But Sarah, how did this start for you, this love affair with Oprah?
Well, first of all, I really want you to work at O Magazine. O Magazine, hire Sadaf. She would be a great editor. Please hire her. For me, my obsession with Oprah started, again, watching with my mom after school. I loved Oprah. I particularly loved her book club. So a fact about my teen years, the coolest thing that I think happened to me, it didn't even happen to me. It happened to a teacher at my school. So there was an English teacher at my school named Miss Mystery, who was married to Roe Hinton Mystery. And his book was picked as, A Fine Balance was picked as an Oprah's book club book. And I was obsessed with that. And then another Canadian book was chosen, which is actually my favorite book of all time, which is Anne-Marie MacDonald's Fall on Your Knees. So I actually really loved Oprah's book club. I think that she did a lot of good work to promote literary fiction. And I really respected that about her. So I think the book club is what made me feel super connected to her. But I also loved her celebrity interviews. I vividly remember Nicole Kidman going on there to promote Moulin Rouge, and that was spicy because she'd been divorced. I remember Tom Cruise jumping on the couch. So if you love books and you love celebrity culture, Oprah was just heaven. And yes, she talked about many other things. She talked about a lot of important social issues that she decided to raise awareness about. She also talked a lot about the soul, which I have to say I'm not as into, right? Like I learned about The Secret by watching Oprah, and she was super into it. She was super into it. So was Ellen DeGeneres at the time, actually. Every talk show host was into it. But I have such vivid and warm memories of watching her. And you're right, it's such a great bonding experience. At the time, that was how different generations of women bonded and were united. We all watched Oprah together.
Yes, it's so true, because not only was that something I watched with my mom, I watched it with my sister, and then you talk about it the next day at school. It was that seminal for so many of us. But tell us a little bit about her history, because let's take it back to the beginning, because she's got quite a backstory.
So Oprah Winfrey was born in 1954 to a single mother, Vernetta Lee, in rural Mississippi. She was supposed to be called Orpah, but they misspelled Oprah's name on the birth certificate, and in the end, people just went with it. At the time, her father, Vernon Winfrey, wasn't in the picture, and Oprah was raised initially by her grandmother, Hattie Mae Lee. Hattie had worked as a maid her whole life and was psychologically preparing Oprah to do the same. And while Oprah remembers growing up with intense physical punishments from her grandmother, it was also Hattie who introduced Oprah to books, sparking Oprah's lifelong love affair with reading. At the age of 6, Oprah moved in with her mother, Vernita, who was lodging at the home of her employer, a light-skinned Black woman named Ms. Miller. So, according to Oprah, Ms. Miller hated the color of Oprah's skin and was so cruel and hateful about that she forced Oprah to sleep outside on the porch. So that's a pretty traumatic thing to have happened to you as a child.
Devastating, yeah.
Yeah, really. Says Oprah, quote, "My mother was boarding with this very light-skinned Black woman who could have passed for white. I could tell instantly when I walked in the room that she didn't like me. It was because of the color of my skin. I remember the first night entering into that house and being told that I wouldn't be able to sleep with my mother and I wouldn't be able to sleep inside the house. There was a little foyer/porch before you actually got inside the house. I was put outside to sleep there."
This is also just a reminder of how strong colorism is in our own communities. This is one of her own targeting her. Oh, it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah. I mean, it's really devastating. Oprah was also physically and sexually abused. In the Apple TV docuseries, The Me You Can't See, Oprah says the following. "At age 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 years old, I was raped by my 19-year-old cousin. The situation was complicated because," she adds, "I didn't know what rape was. Certainly I wasn't aware of the word. I had no idea what sex was. I had no idea where babies came from. I didn't even know what was happening to me, and I kept that secret, and it's just something that I accepted." Oprah later gave birth to a little boy who died when she was 14. And while this was not really a result of the sexual abuse directly, she said that she became sexually active at a young age. She believes in part because she was sexually abused. When her son died after being born prematurely, Oprah recalls her father referring to the turn of events as, quote, "a second chance." So those were his words. And I mean, it both is and isn't, right? Because, of course, that's a really traumatic thing to have happened to you. But also, we really discriminate against teen moms, especially teen moms of color. And it is harder to succeed if you are a racialized teen mom. So, I mean, that's how he described it as a second chance. Sadaf, many people who go on to achieve greatness have difficult childhoods. Do you believe Oprah built an empire because of her trauma or in spite of it? Or is it a combination of the two?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's the combination of the two. I think about this a lot. Some of my friends and I have this running joke, and Sarah, you and I have probably joked about this too, but that trauma makes you a little hotter. There's something about having been through stuff in your life that makes you a fighter, a survivor. It makes you, for some people, it's not the story for everybody, but it makes you speak up and fight for things in a different way from someone else who hasn't experienced strife in the same way. And I do think that is a factor here. I think a lot of people will fight me on this, but I do think there's something to it, because think about how much trauma this woman went to when she was barely a teenager. And then to build the empire that she has, as you said, to kick off this show, there's really no peer for Oprah. So to experience an intense level of trauma and then have an intense level of success like she's had, I do think there are parallels there. But I bet that it's also taken so much work, right, to work on that trauma and to be able to process it and to be able to go on. Because, mind you, it's not a failure if you don't end up doing that when you've been through all of this. It's not. But I do think it's a factor. What do you think, Sarah?
I mean, I think that in order to be as successful as Oprah is, you need to be resilient. And a traumatic childhood makes you, for a lot of people, very resilient. And I'm not trying to say that a traumatic childhood is always a good thing and that we shouldn't protect children. But it is very obvious to me that when you kick Oprah, she gets back up. And I think she had a lot of practice doing that.
Exactly. Not everybody has that in them. This woman is such an anomaly in so many ways, honestly. My God. Also, again, as a Black woman, as a dark-skinned Black woman, and in what era did she kind of come of age in this way, Sarah? Was that the 70s?
Yeah, so she came of age she was born in 1954, so she became an adult in the 70s. And in high school, she was sent to live with her father, Vernon, in Nashville, where she really started to thrive. This was when she really came into her own. Vernon worked as a barber and was a man with very high standards. In Oprah's words, when my father took me, it changed the course of my life. He saved me. He simply knew what he wanted and expected. He would take nothing less. So Oprah began to achieve really impressive things. She won the Miss Black Tennessee pageant at age 17. She also began working at a radio station while still in high school and won a full scholarship to Tennessee State University thanks to her first place finish in an oratory contest.
Wow. Just like you, Sarah.
I am not Oprah's peer. As I said, Oprah's peerless. But yes,
No,
Oprah did inspire me to do public speaking. She did.
There you
She
go. I
did.
knew
I was
it.
like, Oprah did it, so I want to do it. So she later became the youngest news anchor in the history of Nashville's WLAC TV. Her professional rival at the time was none other than John Tesh. You might remember him from Entertainment Tonight. And also, he is, an important, well, I mean, I wouldn't say important, but a composer.
And he's a radio icon. Like that, I hear that name and it lives on in my nightmares, truly. He's not for everyone, but he's certainly a radio icon. So that's pretty impressive for Oprah at that time.
Yeah. But it was in 1984 that Oprah moved to the city where she would become a star, Chicago.
Hey, Chicago! Chicago, all I think of is Oprah. It's wild.
When I was in Chicago in November, I had to go see the Omni where she used to put her guests up, like the one on the Magnificent Mile. I don't even know why. I wasn't staying there, but I had to go see it. I needed to I'd always been curious about what it looked like.
I've only been once, and the thrill that I got going past her studios and her production office was beyond, Sarah, beyond.
Just, yeah. Chicago will always be synonymous with Oprah to me.
It's Oprah City.
It's Oprah City. It's a great city. That is a wonderful distinction, to be Oprah City. So she was hired to co-host AM Chicago. And Oprah did amazing things with AM Chicago. She turned a sleepy local morning show into a ratings giant. She couldn't really cook during the cooking segments. And she wasn't really used to hosting a morning show like that, where she had to be a personality, but it didn't matter. She just got it. She made it work. Oprah had it, and the people were tuning in. She also briefly dated the one and only Roger Ebert during her early days in Chicago, which is a tidbit I couldn't not share. I just love that.
I love that. Roger Ebert also had a taste for ladies of color. I love that for him. I love that. Good job, Roger.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they were lovers is just, I mean.
And I'm glad you used the word lovers because that is very specifically correct here.
Yeah, I mean, I bet there was some belligerent icons, but I bet there was some belligerent sexual tension. Like, can't you just see them from them? I bet they were constantly arguing and debating each other, but they liked it.
Oh, absolutely. I would have paid to witness this. Like, I would have much rather seen them debate rather than see their sex tape, which would also be a thrill for me. I enjoy those, but I would want to see them debate. That's what I want more than anything. They probably had really fun dates.
I'm obsessed. Like, I love Stephen Graham. And I mean, Roger Ebert had a very happy marriage, but there is a parallel universe when they ended up together and they would have been my one true pairing. Like, I wish they had gotten married and had a million little film critic babies, Flash talk show host babies. So Sadaf, what about Oprah is so damn watchable? Why do you think she became such a famous personality so quickly?
I really do think she was lightning in a bottle. It's hard to say what kicked her off so quickly and seemingly easily. Of course, it wasn't easy, I'm sure. But for me personally, it's because she's so charming and she really knows how to have a conversation. I don't know that she's always been the best interviewer, but I think she's a very good conversationalist. And there's something about her that I assume brings in a big feeling of comfort for people. And that really works. She also can be funny. She can be sweet. She can be touching. She's made me cry. She's made me laugh. She's put me in all of my feelings. And that's not an easy thing because through it all, she remains very authentic feeling. And I think even to this day, there are not many TV hosts or journalists, broadcasters who've been able to do it quite like she has. And I think sometimes I think that's just something you're born with. I don't know necessarily that that's something you can develop. What do you think, Sarah?
She definitely has the gift of the gab. She's, as you
Yeah.
said, a great conversationalist. Her interviews, it's funny because she always has the same strategy. And I don't even know if it is a strategy. It's just like, I'm going to have a real conversation. If they choose to share something really vulnerable, that's great. And they often do. A lot of people, I think, are disarmed by that style. And if they
Yes.
don't, she doesn't really push as hard as, say, a Barbara Walters. But in some ways, it makes it easier to watch because sometimes I would get uncomfortable watching Barbara because she was so dogged, right? Like and I mean that in a good way, right? She wanted to get to the bottom of something, right? Whereas Oprah's interviews always felt more consensual, like kind of like, I'll
Yeah.
ask you the question and you can tell me how much you want to tell me, which is much more pleasant to see.
And it's interesting too. I'm so glad you made that point because still Oprah was able to get so many exclusives and to get a
Yeah.
lot of reveals from folks that nobody else could get. And she broke a lot of headlines. I'm gonna say something, and I know people are gonna come at me for this, but as we're talking about this, I think in some ways Drew Barrymore has come the closest to that feeling of comfort that
Yes.
guests are able to pick up on, where she's having more of a conversation than she's actually interviewing. And my God, that can be so irritating sometimes because, as you say, she's no Barbara Walters. She's not going to get that deep cut, that deep hit most of the time. But then sometimes she does because she's using a different process. It works with some people. But I don't think there's really been any other hosts quite like that who've been able to have this particular emotional warmth. Drew still doesn't quite get there, but I think in some ways I see that authenticity come through where they just want to hang out with you. That's really
Yeah.
it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You go to Oprah's to hang, and it's kind of like playing Truth or Dare, and sometimes you might reveal
Yeah.
something you didn't expect to reveal. And that is, I think, how she got a lot of her exclusives. I like the fact that it didn't seem like she ever went into interviews with huge expectations. She seemed very zen about it. Like, whatever happens will happen. And because of that, I think that's why she was so calm and why she broke so many headlines. Uh, People weren't as on their guard. I think when you go on Barbara Walters, you're on your guard. Like,
Yeah, and it's really interesting too because as I'm thinking about it now, Oprah was also really good at calling people out.
she
And she
was.
could make a joke at the perfect time.
Hmm.
She would hit you with a follow-up at the right time. And again, I did say earlier, she may not have been the best interviewer. She did have a habit of interrupting. She did have a habit of maybe missing things here and there. But in the places where she excelled, there's really no comparison, in my opinion. And again, I do think that's because she was looking at as time spent together rather
Yeah.
than you're gonna come in and I'm gonna nail you on this thing. Like I don't think that Tom Cruise would have jumped on anyone's couch, you know?
No, she built rapport. She would always start by building
Exactly. That's
rapport,
it.
which is why celebrities would, I think, end up being more candid or crazy than they were with other people because it was very peculiar when Tom Cruise jumped on the couch and she was goading him. Like by that point, I actually do think she was goading him. She was just like, keep saying her name. Like she was
Yes.
I don't know if she was actually into it or if she was like, this is great TV. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's a really interesting thing too. Like how much of Oprah in all this time has been like a marketer inside. I mean, I think at some point it's inevitable. But at the same time, I think she also likes camp. Like I think that she is a fan of the spectacle herself.
Yeah.
Don't forget her favorite white man, John Travolta, which I remember so well, and even just the lead up to her reveal that that was her favorite white man, and I was so disappointed to know it was Travolta. But then at the same time, I believe it made many, many news headlines the next day.
Yeah.
And that alone was so much fun, you
Yeah.
know? And anytime he came on, it was such a thrill. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, there's something to it. She knew how to have those moments, but I don't know how much she thought about it really, or if it just kind of happened because she is such a pleasant person to be around. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I do actually agree with what I said earlier, where it's like I don't know how great her expectations were for each individual interview. I think she held herself to a really high standard and wanted the show overall to be great, but she
Yes.
seemed to understand that like you don't win them all. And
Mm.
with Barbara, and I relate to this because personality wise, I'm like this. Barbara always seemed like if she didn't get the answer she wanted, she would be so upset. She would be devastated,
God,
right?
yeah.
Like, she was always
Yes.
trying her hardest and seemed like, this is my self-worth. This is who I am, right? And that I relate to that. That's me. That is my personality. I
Yeah.
can't rise above things. I can't be Zen. But Oprah seemed to have like the bigger picture in her head at all times. I think it's because she's a very spiritual person.
I really like that thought.
Well, absolutely. So, if Oprah's TV journalism success weren't enough, she also received an Academy Award nomination for her role in 1985's The Color Purple, directed by Steven Spielberg. Yeah, I know. This woman has so much talent.
Truly, she could do anything.
Continuing her winning streak, in 1986, The Oprah Winfrey Show, a full hour-long talk show, was first broadcast nationwide, and Chicago's favorite lady became one of the most influential women in America. Here's a 1988 quote from Time magazine that reflects on Oprah's success. Quote, "Few people would bet on Oprah Winfrey's swift rise to host one of the most popular talk shows on TV. In a field dominated by white males, she is a Black female of ample bulk," which, we can talk about that word choice.
What a way to say that. Jeez.
Yeah. "As interviewers go, she is no match for, say, Phil Donahue." I mean, Phil Donahue, okay, whatever. Okay. "What she lacks in journalistic toughness, she makes up for in plain-spoken curiosity, robust humor, and above all, empathy. Guests with sad stories to tell are apt to rouse a tear in Oprah's eye. They, in turn, often find themselves revealing things they would not imagine telling anyone, much less a national TV audience. It is the talk show as group therapy session."
That's you know what? As much as I hate the way a lot of that was written, that's a really great point. That's what I think you and I were both trying to say. Empathy.
Yes.
Barbara Walters never had an ounce of empathy. Sorry, Babs.
No, and genuine curiosity, I do think, was part of the formula. She genuinely wanted to know. She was curious about her guests. It wasn't just a job. She is somebody who I think is curious about people in general and what makes them tick and why they do what they do. And what I loved about her was she was just as curious when she was interviewing, important literary authors and public intellectuals as she was when she was interviewing, movie stars, right? She was curious about it all.
Yeah. Yes.
And that really appealed to me. She was just as interested in Rohinton mystery as she was interested in Jennifer Aniston. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. A lot of women I know contain multitudes. And seeing the Oprah show was the only show really that I think was as dynamic as most women I know. Well, audiences and the industry loved Oprah. The series received over a dozen Emmy Awards for Outstanding Talk Show, and sitting on Oprah's couch was a rite of passage for anyone who was anyone. From Jennifer Aniston debriefing the public on her divorce from Brad Pitt to Halle Berry describing a suicide attempt, Oprah got the most eventful interviews, and it wasn't just celebrity interviews either. From introducing her fans to the idea of The Secret to touring America's national parks, Oprah was happy to talk about anything and everything. Her book club also encouraged countless people to read more and boosted the sales of such literary authors as Amory MacDonald, Rohinton Mystery, Toni Morrison, and even Tolstoy. After Oprah endorsed a book, some estimates state it would sell as many as 2 million extra copies.
Wow.
That's power. That is power.
Yeah, seriously. And especially for the books industry, my God.
She was so valuable for the publishing industry. She was so valuable for promoting the love of the written word. And it's interesting. There has been a lot written about why people aren't reading as much as they used to. And people will blame social media. They'll blame cuts to education. One thing I would literally like to see people explore is Oprah's show, her national talk show, went off the air in 2011. Is it just that we weren't having a monthly book club broadcast into our homes on network TV? Is that part of it? And I think maybe it was.
Well, it's interesting because she started the celebrity book club trend. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't even a trend for a long time after she started it, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
your other favorite gal, Reese Witherspoon, was
Yeah.
trying to mimic that and jump onto it a little, which I think is great because I'm always going to support any kind of efforts to get people reading more. Reese has certainly been incredibly successful with it. But yeah, it takes somebody who really gives a shit to be able to support reading in this way. Oprah was dedicated to this for so long. Still, when I find a book with a sticker that says Oprah's book club, I get so happy. And I feel like a lot of people don't like that, but I love that. I like her stamp of approval.
I want to know Oprah read it. Honestly, Oprah has great taste. She chooses things that make you think but are also entertaining. Like more Oprah book club picks in my library, please. Like I've never read an Oprah's book club book and been disappointed. Literally never. I have been
Same.
disappointed by the occasional Reese book. Most of the Reese's books are great,
Yeah.
but I can be disappointed by them. However, with Oprah, everyone's a winner.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so Sadaf, what do you think made Oprah show so special? What was the series' secret sauce? And I know this is really hard. We could probably write a dissertation about this. If we ever do a PhD together, if they allow us to collaborate
Oh,
and do it together, it would be on Oprah. And we could just write, I don't know, probably like 50,000 pages about this. But what was her secret sauce? Do we think we know?
I mean, this goes back to your previous question about what made Oprah so great, right? It was really her. And she is one of those people who I think no matter what she would have gone on to do, she's the person you want to be best friends with and hang
Mm-hmm.
out with. Absolutely, no doubt about it. But I have to say, one side thought that I don't know that this could exist without her or in a different
Mm-hmm.
era. Like there was something about the 80s and 90s that made these kinds of talk shows, it was almost like a variety talk show, if
Yep.
anything, work. And we don't have shows like this anymore. And I really, really miss it. Like we had her, we had Rosie O'Donnell, there was Ricky
Mm-hmm.
Lake for a brief time.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many, and none of them are like what they were. And I have friends who will go back and watch reruns of all of those now. And it hits this nostalgia button that nothing else really does. And again, I feel like Drew Barrymore is probably one of the biggest talk show hosts right now, which is kind of insane. Sorry, I love Drew. I love Drew. I love Drew the actor more than I love her in any other role. But then you also have Jennifer Hudson, which is a little odd to me, and Kelly Clarkson, which is a little odd to me. And those are variety shows in a different way, right? I don't know. What do you think about this thought, Sarah? I just don't know that this could exist outside of the 90s.
You're right. I think it was very 90s because all the things that Oprah loved were such. Oprah is, in many ways, just such a product of the baby boomer generation, right?
Yeah.
And she loved literary fiction and books. This is before people stopped reading. She'd grown up reading. She's interesting because she's the consummate career woman. She can't really cook. She loves William Sonoma, right? She had this curiosity where she loved movie stars as much as she loved politics and just was so multifaceted. I guess like it is a true baby boomer show, and baby boomers, like the height of network TV was when the baby boomers were at their peak of power and were part of the biggest part of the cultural conversation. So yeah, I don't know if you can have a millennial Oprah. Like who would a millennial Oprah be? What would the show be? Because we don't have a monoculture anymore, right? Like you can't. I think maybe the
That's
secret
it.
sauce of the show was it was the best talk show during the time of the monoculture, right? Peak monoculture, because by that point, pretty much everyone had TV, everyone had network TV, everyone could watch Oprah, or else almost everyone could access Oprah. And so it was peak monoculture for a talk show, and we don't have that anymore. So I don't think you can ever recreate that lightning in a bottle. I don't think you can.
God, I this is the Sarah Sahagian theory of all things, and I think you're always right when you bring it up. Yeah, I miss monoculture so badly. And again, like I was saying, when do you ever nowadays watch a talk show and then talk about it with everyone the next day? You don't do that. That
No.
I did, and that was as a child. As children, we got excited to talk about Oprah the next day. That is insanity. You would not do that now. Why would children watch talk shows now? You wouldn't. But there was something about it. We would all watch it with our moms. We'd see them checking it out. That was what they would do after they pick us up from school. That was their break. My mom loved Oprah, my dad loved Oprah. We all loved Oprah. Okay, it was an Oprah household, and that was was everybody. And yeah, that's monoculture. That's the 90s. This was also right before the internet really kind of became what it is now. And I hope this isn't true, but I feel like if this was happening now, Oprah would not be able to be as herself as she was. Because even she probably would have been policed in some ways. That would have been really unfortunate. But I don't know, even when she wheeled out that tub of metaphorical fat, if we remember that infamous moment, I think she could have been wrecked for that, even though I think it was an amazing moment that I will never forget. She would be memed to death, and I don't know that it would always be in her favor if it happened now.
No, no. It would have been canceled once a week. And anybody who had and it's not because she was super problematic. It's just because anybody who had to be that vulnerable on network TV, like 5 days a week, would just end up being canceled once a week in this era. That's just the way it would go. So by 2003, Oprah had become the world's first Black female billionaire, and her legions of fans did whatever our fearless leader advised. I was one of them. Oprah told me to buy a t-shirt. I bought a t-shirt, okay?
Amen.
We bought the books Oprah told us to read, and every year we salivated over the bougie items included on her favorite things list. In fact, it was an Oprah's favorite things episode that first introduced me to the products of Williams-Sonoma, my all-time favorite store.
Well, okay, hold on. Can we talk about this? Because, and especially as we're talking, I'm realizing how many things she taught me, and I'm not kidding. Like she and her show introduced me to so many words, to so many people, to so many concepts that I had never heard in my life. I was very often Googling things. Again, I grew up in the 90s, so there was a reason for this, but she did it in a way that made you really curious, and you didn't have to run and hide away to go Google something on the desktop. Like this was the product of so many great conversations, not only with my friends, but my parents, which is really interesting, honestly.
She, you know what? She really did a lot to raise awareness about the LGBTQ community.
Yes.
And that was very important work. She also did a lot to create, I think, frank discussions. And this is interesting because she wasn't a working mother, but she did a lot of great episodes about what it was like to be a working mother, or what it was like to be a stay-at-home mother. Just she really gave voice to moms. And moms are so maligned and so marginalized in popular culture. And even though she herself is not a mother, she did more to platform the issues that affect moms than I think anyone else did in the 90s. She really was a champion.
God, that is such a good point. Not only that, but she would tackle a lot of topics that were still considered taboo, right? So divorce, racism, domestic abuse, so many things. I remember there would be weeks where I'd be like, I can't watch Oprah today. This is too much for me. Reasonably. Again, I was very young. I was too young.
Yeah. We were all young.
We were, but it was still such an education. And I'm so in admiration of her for doing all of that, because even now there is no single talk show that would handle all of that now, and probably couldn't, even if it tried.
My favorite Oprah episode, well, my favorite that wasn't a celebrity interview, because I really loved her celebrity interviews. My favorite Oprah episode was one from the later years where it was about women in their 40s and 50s who were living with HIV/AIDS. And most of them were, I think that, they had been, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. They were infected with HIV/AIDS because they started dating again kind of later in life. And it was an interesting, frank conversation, and the women all came out publicly about living with HIV/AIDS and what it was like to live with HIV/AIDS. And just things like that were so groundbreaking because she wasn't treating them as other, right? She was normalizing the idea of being HIV positive, right? And having these important conversations. And that's what I really loved about Oprah, that she took a lot of groups that many people would see as other, and she just had conversations with them like she would with Jennifer Aniston. Like, we're hanging out now. And that, I think, is a really important way to humanize people who are not often seen as human by the media.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, well said. I remember that episode too. I haven't thought about that episode in years. Oh my God. And I think actually that might have been the first time I even heard those words, HIV, AIDS, understanding what it was. It's definitely milestones.
I mean, her influence really knew no bounds. Even in the world of politics, she was incredibly influential. So two economists, Craig Garthwaite and Tim Moore at the University of Maryland College Park, have argued that the data suggests Oprah's 2006 endorsement of Barack Obama not only won him the nomination for the Democratic Party, but probably won him the 2008 general election. She's that important.
Incredible.
I'm amazing. Oprah also became an influential philanthropist in this era, starting the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls in South Africa. But Oprah's life wasn't a fairy tale free from controversy, and some singular scandals did happen. First off, there was Oprah's weight. TV critic Richard Blackwell once referred to Oprah as downright lumpy on the cover of TV Guide. Yep. And In Living Color also aired a skit where a performer pretended to be Oprah. After overeating, the fictional Oprah eventually exploded in this skit.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty unkind. In 2023, Oprah told People magazine, "It was a public sport to make fun of me for 25 years." Which is true. It really was. Oprah's weight was the punchline of countless jokes. And of course, it hurt. Sometimes Oprah even turned down party invites because she felt self-conscious about her weight. So, Sadaf, do you think there would be as much emphasis on Oprah's weight if she had risen to prominence today?
Unfortunately, I think there would. I don't think it would be as much as it was back then. And by the way, this also is another reason why I'm so amazed she did that show for as long as she did, because she did suffer so much abuse in the media constantly, largely because of her weight. And I'm sure, of course, a huge part of that too was because she's a dark-skinned Black woman. But I don't know. It's interesting because she started so many conversations on weight, and not all of them were great, right? Like, I like that she was so vulnerable and honest and open about what it felt like to be a larger woman. Mind you, through much of her trajectory, she was not even a fat woman. That's what's so heartbreaking to me. She was viewed that way. She was called lumpy, and whatever that last guy said, which is so horrible. So that was awful in itself. But then, you know, she's also the person who taught me what Weight Watchers was and all these other problematic dieting programs she would talk about. She had so many episodes on dieting. And the one thing I liked about that was it was almost like we were going through her journey with her to body positivity, right? Like, the only difference, though, is that she had such a huge trusting audience. So then it's really problematic, because if you are advocating for XYZ diet that's actually really harmful, she had a lot of fans who would listen to her say this, and then they would jump on it because if Oprah likes it, why wouldn't I like it? And of course, you and I completely agree with that message. And we are here now talking about this years later, so we can see how problematic it is. But at that time, I think the biggest victim was Oprah, because people were just piling on her all the time. It was like she had to answer for all the fat women in the world who don't have to answer for anything and didn't then, don't now. What do you think, Sarah? Because I feel like now at least we have things like the body positivity phrase. I think the movement is a little bit complicated, especially in recent years, but I think it would have been a little different. I think she still would have gotten some heat, though.
So there definitely still would have been some heat. I don't know if people would have been as flagrant with their insults.
Yeah.
Like, people were really over the top with their cruelty. It's pretty similar to what people did with Monica Lewinsky. And also, like, you know, Sarah Ferguson, whom they called the Duchess of Pork. Like, we've done a lot of episodes where we talk about how in the 80s and the 90s, if you were literally larger than a size 8, all people would talk about was your weight, and they would just lambaste you. And it
was the only punchline SNL and the late night guys had for so long.
Yes, absolutely. The only punchline. It was so unoriginal. I mean, here's the thing. Today, I wish she actually were somebody that I could truly consider body positive. And I'm not the arbiter of what is body positive, but she recently did a special on Ozempic. That you can watch on Disney Plus. Yeah, you can watch it on Disney Plus. And she's very pro Ozempic. She's on Ozempic, which, like, that's her choice. But it's a special where she's interviewing other people who are on Ozempic who are like, "Yay, I love Ozempic." It is a very blatantly pro Ozempic special.
Well, I will say, I want to just be clear that there's multiple ways to look at the Ozempic thing, and I'm actually not totally against it, but I think what you're also saying is it's almost like it was an advertisement for this drug, which is problematic.
They did not pay her to do it, but it is just basically a glowing endorsement, right?
It's even worse.
It's basically an Oprah's favorite thing episode just about Ozempic.
Oh my God.
Pretty much. And she took the effort to do a special on this, right? Because this is how enamored she is. And you know what? I'm not going to judge anyone who wants to take Ozempic. Like even somebody who is in Hollywood and is thinner than average, who feels like they need to do this to get cast. Like, I mean, the world is a looksist, sizest place. And it's your body. It's just like, I don't know if we can say that she is now a role model for body positivity because she's just so really enchanted with Ozempic. And when you watch that special, I mean, we could do an entire episode just on that special and dissecting the message of that special, but there isn't really voice given to people who are like, you know what, I don't need it. Some people want it. Some people just feel like, it's fine. I can just live in my larger body and be happy. There aren't really voices that are platformed. They're like, I'm just happy being me, and I wish people would stop fat shaming me.
God, yes. We saw Oprah herself go through waves with it, right? And I think if she was feeling good about her weight, we felt good about our weight. If she didn't feel good about it, we didn't feel good about it. And here's the thing. When you are Oprah or anybody and you're on TV, you have a platform, and that means you have a responsibility to the people who watch you and who take your word for everything. And part of the reason she was so successful is because she was so authentic and vulnerable, as you said. But I don't know if she even really realized that level of impact she could make and why it could be so concerning. Again, I feel like that's also a symptom of the 90s. I don't know that you could get away with all of that now. She'd have a whole team of handlers who would be telling her, hell no, we're not doing that. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's really interesting. It's unfortunate because, Oprah isn't perfect as much as we would like. She is. She's so perfect. She's as perfect as a human being can be.
Yeah.
But she certainly had some moments that were so bad. So bad. This is the top of it for me.
Yeah. I mean, she contains multitudes.
She does. She does.
So the scandal that hurt Oprah the most personally, just like gave her the most personal pain. So we're going to go into this now. And I'm going to warn everyone, this is really upsetting. We're going to talk more about her history of sexual abuse.
If you want to skip ahead about 10 minutes.
So, I mean, this is very upsetting, but Oprah's private family drama regarding her history of sexual abuse became public. Oprah had first told the world that she survived sexual assault in 1986 in the first season of her show. Oprah said, "You see, there really is no darker secret than sexual abuse. I am telling you about myself so that maybe the closet where so many sexual abuse victims and their abusers hide might swing open just a crack today and let some light in." So she was always open about being a survivor, which was her right. It was her right to keep some details private. But that didn't work out for her. She didn't really want to go into as much detail as she was later forced to go into because, unfortunately, Oprah's half-sister, Patricia Lloyd, sold the story of Oprah's teenage pregnancy to the National Enquirer. The world didn't know about that, and Lloyd allegedly sold the story for just $19,000. Says, Oprah, "I took to my bed and cried for 3 days. I was devastated."
Oh, God, I hated this so much.
Yeah, it's really sad. Sadaf, how do you think Oprah survived the reveal of a teen pregnancy? Let's remember that 1990 was certainly a time for victim blaming, and there was a lot of shaming of pregnant teens. There was so much shaming of pregnant teens actually in this era.
Yeah.
Even more so than there is today. I'm not saying that everyone cherishes pregnant teens and is nice to them and treats them properly today. There's still discrimination. But this was just, I would say, peak time for shaming pregnant teens.
Oh my God, yeah. And this is one of those things where I learned about it well after. And when I did, it wasn't so far from that era because there was still so much content throughout the 90s about how terrible it is that this happened to her in both ways, where on the one hand, there was a lot of empathy for her. How did she go through something so terrible and become who she is today? And then on the other hand, quite overwhelmingly, there were a lot of people who I think felt like she betrayed them, which is really odd to me because I don't think she owed anybody this story. Not then, she wouldn't know it to us now. But again, when you're a public figure and as massive as she was, people develop parasocial relationships. They feel like they should know about you. And if she can talk about so many things like her relationship with Stedman, her friendship with Gail, which I hope we touch on at some point, Sarah.
Yes.
But
Yes.
also her body. Why wouldn't she talk about this? But some things people forget is that sexual assault is very hard to discuss. There's no darker secret or hell to have to live with, and to have your own family member be the one who sells you out. There's a reason the National Enquirer doesn't exist anymore.
You don't owe someone, you don't owe the public, even if you're a
No.
public figure, every detail of every traumatic thing that's ever happened to you. Even if you have told them you're a survivor of sexual assault, you don't. You can keep some things private. And I think for some reason, because Oprah was so candid, people thought that that meant she needed to be candid about everything, which is unfair and is a violation. And you're right. Good thing that the National Enquirer is no longer doing this to people.
For a lot of us, these people who actually do decide to speak up about things like assault or abuse, they do become a little bit like role models where you're like, if they could survive through that, then I can do it. And there is something to that. She became that person for a lot of people. That is the brightest way I can look at this because I think it's such a crime, honestly, that this happened. And also, though, I will say it made me even more in admiration of her.
So the news that Oprah had conceived and lost a child as a teen didn't make the public turn on her. In fact, Oprah's candor about the sexual abuse she endured as a kid and the quote, her words, promiscuity she experimented with as an early teen actually seemed to make her more popular and make her more people feel like they could connect with her. So she opened up about important things and created a really valuable conversation about the ubiquity of sexual assault. Oprah was also known to feature frank conversations with other survivors of sexual assault on her show, so she didn't just talk about her own experiences. And that really, I would say, helped, in my opinion, to normalize the idea that we live in a rape culture, which is actually a good thing because, I mean, I don't want to normalize the idea that we should live in a rape culture. It made people realize that rape isn't something that's rare. And I think it made more people comfortable with the idea of opening up about being sexually assaulted. And I do think she had a space where if you were a victim, you didn't have to go on and worry that she would ask, what were you wearing, right? You knew that your victimhood would be respected. So, Sadaf, to what extent can we credit Oprah for raising awareness about rape culture? I, for one, first learned about what rape was by watching an episode of her show. That is a true thing.
I'm so glad you say that because so did I. And I'm only remembering that now as we're talking. I learned what rape was. I learned what the word assault is. I learned so many things, again, from her show, but particularly about this. I think she's a big, big part of this. I really do, because again, she had a global audience, really, really massive. And for her to talk about this, along with all those other hard subjects we talked about, was monumental. And it's interesting because, as I said earlier, I don't know that we would have something like this discussed on a talk show now. It just wouldn't really make sense. Talk shows now are a little more superficial. I don't know that anybody else could handle it quite the way she did. So I think it was of a time, and that is even more so to say, yeah, hell yeah, she was a big reason we talked about this. There were posters in my school library of Oprah talking about hotlines you can call, people you can talk to, like go to your school counselor if XYZ is happening to you. Like those posters should still be up there. What about you, Sarah? What do you think?
Definitely. I think she made it clear that it is not rude to talk about sexual assault, right? That you can have a frank discussion about something that's happened to you. You can bring it up. You don't have to live in shame and stigma. So I think that she was very important and doesn't get enough credit, actually. She did really important advocacy.
She did. She did. God bless.
And she doesn't get enough credit in part because she was popular with stay-at-home moms and housewives, and we denigrate everything that we associate with women's culture. Right?
Exactly, exactly. I think we're so lucky we grew up at that time to have her, honestly. We were just such fans. It's true.
Yeah, absolutely. So over the years, Oprah has been the target of even more gossip stories, really too many to count. There are the constant rumors that she and longtime best friend Gayle King are secretly romantic partners. By the way, if I could be anyone in the world, it would be Gayle King. I really love Gayle King.
Another star. We love Gayle King. Speaking of journalism, now that is a great interviewer. Gayle King is remarkable.
Yes. She is brilliant. I love Gayle King. I mean, I love Oprah. Obviously, I love Oprah, but I also love Gayle, and Gayle is just, I think, a bit underappreciated. She's not just Oprah's best friend. She is incredibly talented.
They're like power besties. I just love it.
Love Gail. Love Gail. For her part, Oprah maintains that her romantic partner is still businessman Stedman Graham. And just because you have a best friend, like it was always weird to me that everyone assumed that she and Gail were lovers. And if they are, I love that for them. But I do believe her that they aren't. I think she would tell us the truth. Not that she owes us the truth, but she's done a lot for the LGBTQ community. So I think if she were herself queer, she probably would just come out. That's my theory. And her partner is Stedman Graham, who's also just like a prince among men.
It does seem to be. And they've been together for many years. Here's what's really interesting about this. I remember, again, I was young and it was another time, but I went along with everybody else where I was like, I don't get it. He doesn't even really live with her. He lives in like a guest house situation. Gail seems to be with her more often. I ran along with all the rumors and I was like, I don't get it. But now, all these years later, being in my 30s, I'm like, Oprah had it figured out. Like, I don't want a man in my home. I don't want to be with you all the time. You are at best my eye candy when I am going to special events, but otherwise I'm hanging out with my best friend. Like, I think she had it down. And also, after all the shit she's been through and all the people she's had in her life constantly, why wouldn't she want to just be alone in her massive property with her help?
Good for Oprah. She has boundaries. And Stedman seems happy.
Boundaries. Yeah.
Stedman seems really happy. Okay.
He does.
I feel like they are relationship goals. I think it seems great. Like, more power to them.
Yep.
Of course, there was also that incident at Hermes in Paris when they were very rude to her when she was there to shop in 2005. That also became a global scandal. Like, we spilled a lot of ink over that event.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And who could forget when Oprah's influence was used against her by the cattle industry? This was something that this lives rent free in my mind. Okay, this is my Roman Empire, people. So yeah. This happened because there was a 1996 segment where she talked about beef, right? It was a segment called Dangerous Food, where Oprah discussed mad cow disease, which was on everyone's brain in the 90s. Oprah said that basically she wasn't convinced beef was safe anymore for a few reasons, and it has stopped me cold from eating another burger. I'm stopped. Okay, so Texas has a food disparagement law. I didn't make that up. That's the thing they have. And the comments were deemed libelous because of that. So the cattle farmers argued Oprah's comments had lost them over $10 million in business, which it, like, honestly probably did because she's very influential. But you are allowed to say what you want. And yeah, Oprah moved her freaking show to Amarillo, Texas for the duration of that trial. Like, this is a real thing that happened?
This is so insane to me. What?
I know. The jury eventually ruled in Oprah's favor, as they should.
Shocker.
As they should.
My God. Listen, I'm always in defense of a farmer, but this was absurd. This was a huge deal.
It was so bizarre. Interestingly, the trial is how Oprah met one Dr. Phil McGraw. Yeah, whose trial consulting business she hired to help her find the best jurors for the case. This is a big business, by the way, in the United States, these jury consulting businesses. So maybe it was gratitude for helping her win, but Oprah took a shine to Dr. Phil. And she gave him his own show, which her production company, Harpo, produced. Harpo would produce the show until 2010. Dr. Phil became known for his no-nonsense and sometimes outright harsh approach to therapy done in front of a live studio audience where everything from a drug addiction to infidelity became a form of entertainment. He is also very conservative, and he has MAGA politics today. That's a thing. He also was a big supporter of George W. Bush. Like, he's always been out as a conservative, right? He doesn't
hide.
No, he's never hidden. In addition, Oprah has brought Dr. Oz to prominence as well. So she gave us that quack. Okay, I shouldn't say quack. Like,
he is a quack.
Well, he has a medical specialty he's qualified to do, but then he talks about stuff he doesn't know about. So he's a quack when it comes to anything else.
Yeah.
And he even ran to be a Republican senator and
Oh my
thankfully
God.
lost that bid. But she has brought a lot of like kind of conservative quacks, well, not a lot, but two, to prominence, to national prominence. So, Sadaf, to what extent can or should we hold Oprah accountable for adding these problematic men to our cultural conversation and giving them a platform? Oprah has done so much for the world, promoting authors, normalizing conversations about sexual assault, helping us get the tea on Hollywood divorces, which matters too. So,
Yeah.
how does her affiliation with these two sleazes impact her legacy?
God, it's not good. And these were two big fucking leeches, man. Like we're still dealing with the repercussions of Dr. Oz and
Cool.
Dr. Phil today. Really, really bad. And I don't think she's really, I don't want to say answered for them, but really talked about this much, which is probably smart on her part. But yeah, I don't think it's great. And as we said earlier, nobody's perfect, including Oprah. And also, I will add to her part, listen, if you're going to be the first for a lot of things, that means you
Mm-hmm.
are going to make some big fuck ups and mistakes along the way. So that certainly happened here. She was also like, even just in having the two of them, this was big for the talk show circuit. Like now it's not unlikely to see like the doctors, for example, or like any kind of variety show that's led by another kind of specialist. Now it's become pretty common. At that time, it was brand new. So it was a thrill to see Doctor Anything have a segment or have a show, and then, stay-at-home moms can watch that during the day. But I don't know. This was really awful. I feel like there was no real vetting process, and I feel like Dr. Phil especially kind of it all got to his head, and then he became very much a quack in every way. And again, once you have the Oprah seal of approval, people are going to automatically trust you. So again, I think she fumbled that responsibility really poorly. I think it's really done a lot of damage to society, actually. Sarah, what do you think?
I think it's really hard to overstate how much
Yeah.
damage Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz have done. Like,
Uh,
if you
we had
follow,
bad baby because of Dr. Phil, okay? Bad baby. Like there are so
yeah,
many people who, because of them, have gotten out into the world. It's hell.
I mean, if you listen to their advice, whether you listen to Dr. Phil's therapy or Dr. Oz's physical health advice, you are probably less healthy than you otherwise would be.
Probably.
That is a serious thing. I mean, like Dr. Oz, how different is he from Mel Gibson in Apple Cider Vinegar? Like he's never said, "Oh," and lied and pretended he had brain cancer. But all the stuff he's telling you to do that he says is going to make you healthier, and it's just the worst advice ever. And the people he platforms. Okay, I'm not a fan of Dr. Oz. I think he is a really unethical and bad person. I think the same thing about Dr. Phil. They're both
Yeah.
bad people. It troubles me that Dr. Oz wants to be a politician. That really upsets me. That
Well,
made me think he was sort of next level evil. That he's like, and now I
know.
should be a senator. Um, he was also so bad at campaigning. Like when he was
He
referring to a plate of
was.
vegetables as crudité. I'm like,
Oh my
trying
God.
trying to be.
But he had a moment there where people were kind of into it a little bit. I don't know. Listen, I'll say this. Like, for many, many years, people are always asking Oprah if she'll ever run. I don't think she will. But it does, it's a many, many stones throw from her over to one of these guys, but it helps me see why they might think they could do it. I also think this is another symptom of the times. If these guys popped up now with their own shows, everybody would do their Reddit research and call them out for the scammers they are. And then, Oprah would have been ruined in another way.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure. And I
Yeah.
mean, Dr. Phil was not somebody at the time he was doing jury consulting. Like, I don't understand why she
God, that's
thought he should be
crazy.
America's therapist.
Yeah,
No, why?
that's really wild, actually.
Yeah, it is really bizarre. It is. I honestly feel like did she just trauma bond with him because the trial was so difficult? She was so grateful to him for helping her get through it. Is that why she gave him a platform? And honestly, initially, some of his Dr. Philisms, some of his sayings were catchy, but he shouldn't have been giving people therapy on national TV. I don't think he should be giving anyone therapy, really. He doesn't seem good at it.
No, and I think because of that, we have so many other people now who do the same thing on podcasts. Sarah and I try not to do any therapizing, but there's
No.
many therapists of so-called doctors who will do the same thing. There's many shows. It's disturbing. It's very disturbing.
Yep, it is. I mean, I don't think that I agree with you that it doesn't really detract from all the amazing things Oprah did. And honestly, no one has a perfect batting average, right? If you are going to do 5 episodes a week for 25 years,
yeah,
there are going to be some mistakes. It is unfortunate that these mistakes ended up being so influential. Influential. But yeah, everyone makes mistakes. She also brought us Nate Berkus, who is a god. Like, just, I'm so glad.
I was gonna say that. Yes, she did give us that sweet baby angel.
Just makes you believe that the world is a good place.
Yes, I love that man.
Exactly. So it's not like she only gave us Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz. However, if we could erase them from the history of the Oprah show, I would say we should.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I will say I'll give you a little counterpoint along with the Nate Berkus one. But these are some of my favorite episodes of in the Oprah history. But the James Fry debacle, do you remember that, Sarah?
Yeah.
James Fry being the man who wrote A Million Little Pieces, and it was supposed to be his memoir, and in it he was talking about his so-called addictions and how he got through it, and it turned out a lot of it wasn't true, and she had chosen it as an Oprah's book club pick. And when she found out that a lot of it was not true, and again he was another scammer, another white man scammer, she brought him back on the show to talk about that and confronted him, which was really fantastic. And I wish that she would have done that with these other men, but she certainly kind of had, listen, she loves herself some John Travolta. She loves some Tom Cruise. As we all know, I love Tom Cruise. But listen, she likes some problematic men. She does not have the best taste in men. Maybe that's what we can bring it down to.
I mean, Stedman seems great, but
Stedman
otherwise
does seem great.
And obviously Roger Ebert is great, but you're right. Otherwise, she likes some problematic men. That's true.
Yeah. Although, hey, I do wonder if her and Stedman have ever been open.
And if so, like, I love that for them. Like, I
I
feel
do
like they're very
too.
involved and their relationship could survive anything. I feel like they could just talk about any issue and get through it.
So jumping off from that, if he is like her steady, she goes out there with like all these crazy, terrible guys, and then she comes back home to her good man at the end of the night. I also kind of love that for her, but maybe don't publicize it, Oprah.
I mean,
Don't
like,
give all those guys shows. They don't all need airtime.
No, they absolutely do not. But who would not want to come home to Stedman Graham? I
Ugh.
like, just,
I
would.
feel like I think he gives good cozy hugs, and I think he smells like coffee, which I love.
Or tea, like specialty tea.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
A little oolong.
He's a really good dog dad.
Oh.
He's super aspirational. I love Stedman Graham. I have a friend who believes that basically Stedman Graham is the only nice straight man in the world. He's like, there's only one good straight man, and that is Stedman Graham.
Well, that's really interesting.
I would add in Alexis Ohanian. I think he is a good straight man.
Well, okay, listen, to be the husband to women who are as successful as A. Williams or Oprah, and not to mention these are also Black women who are really killing it at the forefront of their industries, you better be a good man and you better be able to live up to that. And I think, oh God, Alexis is a fucking good one, man. I love that man.
He is a great representative for my people. He's Armenian as well. I'm part Armenian.
Oh, right.
And Rafi. Anytime I see those two Armenian kings like on social media, I'm like, go do the Lord's work.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, he's a good guy. And you're right. Stedman's our man. Okay, we champion Stedman here.
Yeah. So Oprah continues to thrive in 2025. I did mention she is now on Ozempic and she's very pro Ozempic. She openly credits it for improving her life, but much more importantly, she has a new podcast, the Oprah Podcast, which launched in 2024, and you should check it out if, like us, you can't get enough of hearing Oprah's voice. And she's still besties with Gayle King, a goddess in her own right, as we have said, just one of our favorite people. Oprah still regularly shows up on lists of America's most influential women, despite having ended the Oprah show. And she hasn't really been on a network, she hasn't been on network TV every day since 2011, but she's still that influential, and she always will be. That's staying power for you.
Yeah, and I remember when she ended it, I was so
Oh God, I cried. I cried.
Yeah, I think I was sadder than I needed to be, and I don't blame you for crying. TV is certainly not the same, but I think, listen, there are a lot of lists out there that come out saying so and so is really influential, they're shaping the world, et cetera, et cetera. I think Oprah is absolutely one of those people. You can't say that for a lot of pop culture figures, but you will always be able to say that about Oprah.
Oh, for sure. So now the time has come for one of our favorite segments. Hindsight is 2025.
I shouldn't have done that.
So, Sadaf, if you could do anything differently, if you were Oprah, Oprah is a perfect human, but if you were to do anything differently, what would it be?
Sadly, there's many things. I'm trying to just choose one. My first thought was not bringing all these horrible white men into our lives, but you know what? They also are grown men who could have spoken for themselves and gotten some consultation teams who could have done a little work for them.
Yeah.
I don't want to put that all on her. What I have always struggled with in all this time with Oprah is how she handled conversations around her body. Because I think it impacted me in the way that I felt about my body. I think it impacted my mom. I know it impacted a lot of women in my life to this day. So that is what I so deeply wish she had been a little bit. I don't know how I would have wished she'd take it differently, because on the one hand, I like, again, that she was so vulnerable and was just trying to share, but maybe don't bring out that wagon of meat or fat or whatever it was, or don't talk about every single diet and Weight Watchers and all these things. Just one of those. Take one of them out. I didn't need to hear it. What about you, Sarah?
So mine is basically, why did she give us Dr. Oz? So I understand how she trauma bonded with Dr. Phil. I understand how that happened. And I think if I had credited him with getting me out of that lawsuit as well,
yeah,
I probably would have felt the same level of gratitude.
Fair.
I understand how that happened. But I feel like once she got to know Dr. Oz after a few segments, and he started to kind of overstep and pretend that he was a medical expert on everything and talk about everything from like depression to fertility to nutrition as though he was an expert. At that point, you have to sort of think like, does this man want to be a doctor or a cult leader? Like what's his deal, right?
Well, I wonder too, we didn't touch on this, but if, to some degree, the fame must have also gone to her head. I think it's inevitable for a lot of people. And she was as famous as it gets. Maybe she couldn't see, she lost a little bit of awareness, maybe?
I don't know. But that was the one where I just don't understand how it got so out of control, right? Because there were lots of people who would come on for some Oprah segments, and then you just never hear from them again in the long term, right? He could have been a flash in the pan, and she did really keep platforming him. And that's the one that I just don't get it. But no one is perfect, even perfect people like Oprah. She's perfect, but yes, even perfect people have imperfections.
Exactly.
So that's the thing I think I probably would have done differently. I mean, in terms of the stuff she did about her weight, she was such a product of the diet culture that we were all inundated with at the time. And I just feel like she'd internalized it. And I don't really fault her for that, in the same way that, like, I don't fault anybody who at that time was desperate to lose weight and was fixated on it and talking about it all the time. Monica Lewinsky also was a spokesperson for weight loss services, right? Because people were so relentlessly cruel to her about her weight. And so then she internalized all of it. So I feel like that was something I don't know, there's just a whole cultural problem. And even Oprah, I don't think was powerful enough to resist it at the time.
You're so right. In fact, you may have swayed me. I'm with you. I know we're about to wrap up, so I just want to say one quick note, Oprah, my dear, dear goddess, if you're listening by any slim chance, thank you for just being such an amazing and dynamic journalist, because she really is a big reason that I do what I do now. She was so essential to it. So thank you, Queen. I love you.
I love you too. Thank you. Thank you for helping me discover some of my favorite books. Thank you for teaching me so many things about the world. And on that note, I would like to end with my favorite Oprah Winfrey quote. Think like a queen. A queen is not afraid to fail. Failure is another stepping stone to greatness.
Ah, amazing. Hallelujah.
So thank you to all of our wonderful listeners. We hope that you'll come back, because we have a lot more things to cover. We also hope that you will follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/thereheat, where we've got some goods in store for you. And if you want to check me out, you can follow me at Sahagian Sarah on Instagram. Sadaf, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me on Twitter at _Sadaf Hassan. And if you like this podcast, you know the drill. Rate, review, subscribe. subscribe. It makes it easier for other people to find us. And we're going to continue on for the rest of the month with our special women-centric episodes. So please tune in.
The Reheat is available for free on the Seeker app. You can also find the show on the Frequency Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.